Minji sat in the leather chair for about 10 minutes, quietly looking through the car magazine. She was not really reading the words. She was just trying to stay out of the way and wait for James peacefully. But she could feel eyes on her. The two young salespeople kept glancing in her direction. Finally, they walked over to her. Their shoes clicked loudly on the shiny floor. The sound echoed through the big showroom. Minji looked up and smiled politely. The young man spoke first. His name tag said Brandon in gold letters. "Ma'am, I need to ask you a few questions." Minji put down the magazine. "Of course. We have a policy here," Brandon said. He tried to sound professional, but there was something mean in his voice. "We need to qualify our potential buyers before we spend time with them. I'm sure you understand. Our time is valuable." The young woman, whose name tag read Jessica, nodded in agreement. She had her arms crossed and was looking down at Minji like a teacher looking at a naughty student. Minji felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her face calm. "I understand. What would you like to know?" Brandon pulled out a tablet from under his arm. "First, what is your budget for a vehicle purchase?" "I have not decided on an exact number yet," Minji said honestly. "That is why I wanted to look around first and talk to my husband." Jessica made a small sound, almost like a laugh, but not quite. "You do not have a budget? Do you understand that our vehicles start at $200,000? "Yes, I saw the prices," Minji said quietly. Brandon tapped on his tablet. "What do you do for work, ma'am?" Minji hesitated. She did not work a regular job anymore. She had been a social worker for 15 years after college. She had helped homeless families find housing and resources. She had worked with children in foster care. It had been hard work that paid very little money. 5 years ago, James had asked her to stop working because he wanted her to rest and focus on her volunteer work instead. He said she had given enough to her career and deserved to do only what made her happy. Now she volunteered at a homeless shelter every weekend and helped at a community center twice a week. But she did not think these people would understand that or respect it. "I do volunteer work," she said simply. Brandon and Jessica looked at each other. Jessica's eyebrows went up. Brandon's mouth twitched like he was trying not to smile. "Volunteer work," Brandon repeated slowly. "So you do not have a job?" "Not a paid job, no," Minji admitted. Jessica uncrossed her arms and put one hand on her hip. "And what does your husband do?" "He works in business," Minji said. She did not want to say more than that. James had always taught her to be humble. He never liked it when people knew about his money or his position. He said it changed how people treated him and he preferred to be treated like a normal person. "What kind of business?" Brandon pressed. "Technology," Minji said. "Technology," Jessica repeated in a mocking tone. "Like, does he work at a computer store or something?" Minji felt her face getting hot. "Something like that." By now, other people in the showroom were starting to notice the conversation. A middle-aged couple looking at a Bentley kept glancing over. A young man in a business suit standing near the Porsche display had stopped what he was doing and was watching. Brandon leaned closer. "Ma'am, I am going to be honest with you. The cars in this showroom are very expensive. They are for people with significant financial resources. We get a lot of people who come in here just to look around or take pictures for social media. We cannot waste our time with people who are not serious buyers." "I am a serious buyer," Minji said firmly. Her voice was still polite, but there was steel underneath it now. Jessica laughed out loud this time. "Really? You are a serious buyer? You do not have a job. You did not even bring your husband with you. You are taking pictures with your phone like a tourist. Come on." Minji stood up from the chair. She was shorter than both of them, but she stood up straight and looked them in the eyes. "I am waiting for my husband. He will be here very soon. We plan to shop together. I came early to look around first." Brandon shook his head. "Sure, the rich husband who is coming any minute. We hear that story all the time." "It is true," Minji said. "What kind of car does your husband drive?" Jessica asked with a smirk. "Let me guess. A Honda? A Toyota?" Minji felt her throat tighten. She did drive a Hyundai, actually. A 7-year-old Hyundai that still ran perfectly fine. She did not see any reason to replace it just because they could afford to. James had offered to buy her any car she wanted, but she had said no. She did not need a fancy car to be happy. "I drive a Hyundai," Minji said quietly. Brandon and Jessica burst out laughing. They tried to cover their mouths, but they could not stop. Other salespeople in the showroom turned to look. The older salesman who had been helping the wealthy couple finally walked over. His name tag said Richard Chen, Senior Sales Manager. He had gray hair and an expensive watch. He looked at Minji with cold, calculating eyes. "Is there a problem here?" Richard asked. Brandon quickly composed himself. "No problem, sir. We were just explaining to this lady that she might be more comfortable at a different dealership." Richard looked Minji up and down, the same way Jessica and Brandon had done earlier. His face showed everything. He saw her cheap clothes. He saw her old purse. He saw her worn sneakers. And he made his judgment in 2 seconds. "Ma'am," Richard said in a smooth voice, "I appreciate your interest in our showroom, but as my associates have explained, our vehicles require a significant financial commitment. We have a responsibility to ensure that our customers are qualified before we invest our time and resources." "I am qualified," Minji said. Her voice shook slightly, but she kept her head high. "Really?" Richard said. He did not sound convinced. "What is your annual household income?" Minji's mouth fell open slightly. "That is a very personal question." "It is a necessary question," Richard said. "If you want to be taken seriously here, you need to prove that you have the means to purchase one of our vehicles." The middle-aged couple who had been watching from the Bentley display whispered to each other. The woman shook her head in disgust. She looked like she wanted to say something, but her husband put a hand on her arm and pulled her away. Minji felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give these people the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "I do not need to prove anything to you," she said quietly. "I came here as a customer. I expected to be treated with respect." Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, here we go. Now she is going to complain about respect." "We treat our real customers with plenty of respect," Brandon added, "but we also have a responsibility to protect our inventory from people who just want to waste our time." Richard held up a hand to silence them. He turned back to Minji with a fake smile. "Let me offer you a solution. We have a partnership with several other dealerships in the area, more affordable options. I would be happy to give you some business cards. You might find something more suitable to your budget there." "I do not want business cards," Minji said. "I want to wait for my husband." "How convenient," Jessica muttered under her breath. But it was loud enough for Minji to hear. The imaginary rich husband. Minji pulled out her phone and checked the time. "James should be here any minute now." She had texted him the address of the showroom. He had replied saying he was leaving the office and would be there soon. She looked back at Richard, Brandon, and Jessica. They were all staring at her with expressions that ranged from pity to contempt to amusement. Behind them, other salespeople pretended to be busy, but Minji could see them watching and whispering. The wealthy couple that Richard had been helping earlier were standing by the door. They had apparently finished their business and were leaving. As they walked past, the woman caught Minji's eye and gave her a small, sympathetic smile. It was a tiny moment of kindness in an ocean of cruelty. Minji sat back down in the leather chair. She placed her hands on her lap and took a deep breath. She thought about her grandmother who had raised her after her parents died. Her grandmother had been a house cleaner who worked 3 jobs to put Minji through school. She had taught Minji that dignity came from within, not from what other people thought of you. "I will wait here," Minji said firmly. Richard sighed deeply, like she was being unreasonable. "Fine, wait if you want, but you are wasting your time." The 3 of them walked away, back to their spots in the showroom. But every few minutes, one of them would look over at Minji and whisper something to the others. Then they would laugh. Minji pulled out her phone and texted James, "I'm here at the showroom. Take your time." "I am fine." She was not fine. She felt humiliated and small. But she would never tell James that in a text message. She would wait for him to arrive and then everything would be okay. Outside the window, the afternoon sun was starting to sink lower in the sky. The light changed from bright white to warm gold. Minji watched the cars passing by on the street. Hondas and Toyotas and Fords mixed with occasional luxury cars. She thought about the Ferrari she wanted to buy for James. She thought about his face when he would see it. The surprise and joy in his eyes. That was what mattered. Not these people and their cruel words. Not their judgments and their assumptions. Minji had been sitting in the leather chair for almost 30 minutes. She tried to ignore the stares and whispers from the salespeople. She kept her eyes on her phone, scrolling through messages and pretending everything was normal. But her hands were shaking slightly. Jessica and Brandon had gone back to their positions near the wall. Every few minutes they would look at her and whisper something to each other. Then they would laugh quietly. Richard, the senior manager, was now helping a new customer who had just arrived. A man in an expensive suit looking at a Maserati. Richard was all smiles and charm with him. The showroom was busy now. It was late afternoon and more people had come in to browse. Most of them were dressed well. Designer clothes and expensive accessories. They fit in perfectly with the luxury atmosphere. And then there was Minji, in her simple jeans and old sweater, sitting alone in the corner. She checked her phone again. Still nothing new from James. She started to worry a little. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe his meeting ran late. She knew he would come. He always kept his promises. Suddenly she heard it. A deep, powerful rumble from outside. It was the sound of a very expensive engine. The kind of sound that makes people stop and turn their heads. Everyone in the showroom heard it too. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People turned toward the tall glass windows that faced the street. Even the salespeople stopped what they were doing and looked outside. A massive car was pulling up to the front of the building. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, painted in a stunning midnight blue that seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight. The chrome accents sparkled like diamonds. The iconic Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament stood proudly at the front. Minji's heart skipped a beat. She recognized that car. It was James's favorite, the one he only drove on special occasions. But why had he brought it today? They were supposed to look at cars together casually. She had expected him to come in his regular Mercedes that he drove to work. But the surprise was not over. Behind the Rolls-Royce, a silver Bentley Continental pulled up. And behind that, a black Mercedes Maybach. 3 luxury vehicles worth millions of dollars combined, now sat parked directly in front of Hamilton Luxury Motors. The entire showroom had gone completely silent. Everyone was staring out the windows. It looked like a scene from a movie. Like royalty had arrived. The driver's door of the Rolls-Royce opened. A tall man stepped out. He was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His black shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His black hair was styled neatly. Even from inside the showroom, he looked powerful and important. Minji stood up from her chair. Her heart was pounding. It was James. Her James. Looking like he had just stepped out of a business magazine cover. The doors of the other 2 cars opened. 2 men in dark suits got out. One of them was carrying a leather briefcase. The other held a folder of documents. They were clearly James's assistants. Brandon had his phone out. His hands were shaking as he typed frantically on the screen. His face had gone pale. Jessica stood next to him, her mouth hanging open in shock. She could not seem to close it. Richard Chen had frozen in place. He was standing next to the Maserati with his wealthy customer, but he was no longer paying attention to the customer at all. His eyes were locked on the man walking toward the showroom entrance. His face had turned an interesting shade of white, then red, then white again. Minji walked toward the door. She was smiling now. A real, genuine smile. All the humiliation and hurt from the past hour melted away. James was here. Everything would be okay. James pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. His presence filled the room immediately. It was not just because he was tall or well-dressed. It was something else. An air of quiet authority. The kind of presence that made people instinctively straighten up and pay attention. His eyes scanned the showroom quickly, professionally, taking in every detail. Then they found Minji, and his whole face changed. The serious business expression melted into warmth and love. He smiled the smile he only gave to her. He walked straight to her, his shoes clicking on the polished floor. He did not look at anyone else, not at the salespeople who were staring, not at the other customers who had stopped shopping to watch. Only at her. "Hello, my love," James said softly when he reached her. He bent down and kissed her gently on the cheek. Then he took her hands in his. "I'm sorry I'm late. The meeting ran longer than expected." Minji squeezed his hands. "It is okay. I was just looking around." James studied her face carefully. He had been married to her for 20 years. He could read her like a book. He saw something in her eyes, something that did not match her calm words. "Did you find anything you like?" he asked. "I was just browsing," Minji said. She tried to keep her voice light. I wanted to get some ideas before we looked together. James nodded slowly, but his eyes told her he knew something was wrong. He would ask her about it later in private. For now, he just held her hand. Behind them, there was a sudden flurry of movement. Richard Chen had abandoned his wealthy customer and was rushing toward them. His face was red and he was breathing hard like he had just run a race. He had his hand extended and a huge fake smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Park," Richard practically shouted. "What an honor. What an absolute honor to have you here." James turned slowly. He looked at Richard's extended hand but did not take it. His face remained polite but neutral. "Good afternoon," James said simply. Richard's hand hung in the air for a few awkward seconds before he lowered it. He was still smiling, but there was panic in his eyes now. "Mr. Park, I am Richard Chen, the senior sales manager here at Hamilton Luxury Motors. We are so thrilled to have you visit our showroom. If I had known you were coming, I would have prepared a proper welcome." James did not respond to that. Instead, he looked down at Minji again. "Did Mr. Chen help you when you arrived?" Minji hesitated. She did not want to cause trouble. She never did. That was not her nature. She started. But James saw the hesitation. He saw the way she glanced at Jessica and Brandon, who were still standing frozen near the wall. He saw the way other customers in the showroom were watching with interest. And he understood. One of James's assistants had walked into the showroom now. He was a young man named Dong Hyun who had worked for James for 3 years. He leaned close to James and whispered something in his ear. James's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. They became colder, harder. "I see," James said quietly. Richard was sweating now. Actual beads of sweat were forming on his forehead. "Mr. Park, is there something wrong? Please let me know how I can assist you." James ignored him. He turned to Minji and spoke gently. "My love, I need you to tell me something. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Did these people treat you well when you arrived?" Minji looked up at her husband. She saw the concern in his eyes. The love, the protectiveness. She thought about lying. She thought about saying everything was fine so they could just leave and forget this whole experience. But she also thought about her grandmother's words. "Always tell the truth even when it is hard." "No," Minji said softly. "They did not treat me well." The temperature in the showroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. James's jaw tightened. He kept his voice calm and controlled, but everyone could hear the steel underneath. "Tell me what happened." Before Minji could answer, a woman's voice spoke up from across the showroom. It was the middle-aged woman who had been watching earlier with her husband. She'd been about to leave but had stopped when she saw the Rolls-Royce arrive. "I saw what happened," the woman said loudly. She walked toward them with determined steps. Her husband followed behind her, looking uncomfortable. "Your wife was treated terribly. Those 2 young people over there," she pointed at Jessica and Brandon. "They mocked her. They questioned whether she could afford to be here. They suggested she go to a Toyota dealership instead." The woman's husband nodded in agreement. "It was very disrespectful. We almost left because of it. We did not want to support a business that treats people that way." Another voice joined in. It was the young man in the business suit who had been looking at the Porsche. "I heard it too. They asked her invasive questions about her income and her job. They basically accused her of wasting their time." James listened to each person speak. His face remained calm, but his hands had formed into fists at his sides. Minji gently touched his arm and he relaxed slightly. Richard Chen looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "Mr. Park, I was not aware. I was helping another customer." "You were aware," James said quietly. He turned to face Richard fully now. "My wife told me she spoke to you. What did you say to her?" Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I may have suggested. I offered to give her information about other dealerships." "Other dealerships," James repeated. His voice was dangerously quiet now. "You told my wife to go somewhere else because you did not think she belonged here." No, Mr. Park, you misunderstand." "I do not misunderstand anything," James said. He looked past Richard to where Jessica and Brandon stood. They were both pale and shaking. Brandon had put his phone in his pocket. Jessica looked like she might cry. James's other assistant, an older man named Sang-min, had entered the showroom now. He walked up to James and whispered something else in his ear. James listened and nodded once. He turned to address the entire showroom. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner. Everyone stopped what they were doing to listen. "I am James Park," he said. "I am the CEO of Park Industries. I came here today with my wife to look at cars for our anniversary. Instead, my wife was judged, mocked, and humiliated because of how she was dressed. You could have heard a pin drop in that showroom." James continued, "What you may not know is that my wife, Minji, is worth more than every car in this building combined. Not because of money, but because of who she is. She is kind. She is humble. She volunteers her time to help homeless families. She treats everyone with respect and dignity." Minji's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears this time. "And today," James said, "she was treated like she did not matter because she was not wearing expensive clothes or carrying a designer purse." He turned back to Richard. "I want to speak to your manager now." Richard Chen's face had turned a sickly gray color. He looked like he might actually faint. His hands were trembling as he pulled out his phone. "Mr. Park, please let me explain," Richard started to say. "There is nothing to explain," James said firmly but calmly. "You made your choices. Now I want to speak to whoever is in charge of this dealership." Richard nodded quickly and pressed a number on his phone. His hand was shaking so badly that he almost dropped it. He held the phone to his ear and turned slightly away, speaking in a low, urgent voice. But everyone in the quiet showroom could hear him. "Mr. Patterson, this is Richard at the main showroom. We have a situation. James Park is here." "Yes, that James Park, from Park Industries. There has been a misunderstanding with his wife." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Richard ended the call and turned back to James. Sweat was now running down his face. "The dealership manager, Mr. Patterson, is coming from his office right now. He will be here in just a moment." James nodded once. He turned to Minji and spoke softly, just for her. "Are you okay?" Minji squeezed his hand. "I am okay now that you are here." "Did they hurt you?" James asked. His voice was gentle, but his eyes were still hard. "Not physically," Minji said. "Just my feelings." James's jaw clenched again. He looked at her with such love and such anger at the same time. Anger at the people who had hurt his wife, but love and gentleness when he looked at her. Across the showroom, Jessica had started crying. Real tears were streaming down her face. She was shaking and her makeup was starting to run. Brandon stood next to her, completely frozen. His face was white as paper. He looked like he was in shock. The other salespeople in the showroom were trying to pretend they were busy with other things, but everyone was listening. Everyone knew something big was happening. The wealthy customers who had been browsing were now standing in small groups, whispering to each other. Some of them looked angry on Minji's behalf. Others looked curious about what would happen next. A few people had pulled out their phones and were recording. Dong Hyun, James's assistant, pulled out a tablet from his briefcase. He walked over to James and showed him something on the screen. James looked at it and nodded slowly. His expression grew even more serious. "Richard," James said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Come here." Richard walked over on shaky legs. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. "Yes, Mr. Park. Do you know who owns this dealership?" James asked. Richard blinked in confusion. "Yes, sir. It is owned by Morrison Automotive Group." "And do you know who Morrison Automotive Group's largest investor is?" Richard's eyes went wide. His mouth fell open. "Oh no," he whispered. "That is right," James said quietly. "Park Industries owns 35% of Morrison Automotive Group. I sit on their board of directors, which means in a way I am one of your employers." Richard looked like he might actually be sick. He put a hand on a nearby display to steady himself. "Did you know that when you were dismissing my wife?" James asked. "Did you think about who she might be connected to?" "No, sir," Richard whispered. "I did not know." "And that is exactly the problem," James said. His voice was not loud, but it filled the entire showroom. "You should not need to know who someone is connected to in order to treat them with respect. Every person who walks through that door deserves to be treated with dignity, whether they are a billionaire or a janitor, whether they are wearing a suit or jeans." A man in his 50s came rushing through a door at the back of the showroom. He was wearing an expensive suit and his face was red from running. "This must be Mr. Patterson, the dealership manager." "Mr. Park," he called out as he hurried over. He was breathing hard. "Mr. Park, I am David Patterson, the general manager here. I am so terribly sorry for whatever has happened. Please let me." James held up a hand and Mr. Patterson stopped talking immediately. "Mr. Patterson," James said calmly. "Are you aware of how your staff treated my wife today?" Mr. Patterson looked confused. He glanced at Minji, then at Richard, then at Jessica and Brandon. He was clearly trying to piece together what had happened. I was in my office doing paperwork. I was not aware of any issues until Richard called me just now. "Let me explain the situation to you," James said. He spoke slowly and clearly, making sure every word was understood. "My wife came to your showroom approximately 1 hour ago. She came to look at cars because she wanted to surprise me with a gift for our anniversary. She was treated with disrespect and contempt by your staff. She was questioned about her income. She was mocked for her appearance. She was told to go to a Toyota dealership because she did not look like she belonged here." Mr. Patterson's face went from red to white in seconds. "Oh my God." "Your staff members," James continued, gesturing toward Jessica and Brandon, "laughed at her. They made jokes about her imaginary rich husband. They treated her like she was less than human because she was not wearing designer clothes." Mr. Patterson turned to look at Jessica and Brandon. His expression was a mixture of horror and fury. "Is this true?" Neither of them could speak. Jessica was sobbing now. Brandon just nodded once, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "And your senior sales manager," James said, nodding toward Richard. "Instead of correcting his staff or helping my wife, he joined in. He offered her business cards to other dealerships. He implied she could not afford to shop here." Richard tried to speak. "Mr. Park, I thought. I was just trying to—" "You were trying to save time," James finished for him. "You made a judgment based on appearance. You decided in 30 seconds that my wife was not worth your time or attention. The whole showroom was watching now. Even the customers who had been pretending not to listen were now openly staring. Some were nodding in agreement with James's words. Others looked uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing themselves in Richard's behavior. Sang-min, James's other assistant, had been speaking quietly on his phone near the entrance. He walked over to James and whispered something. James listened, and his expression darkened further. "Mr. Patterson," James said, "my assistant just informed me of something interesting. Park Industries is not just an investor in Morrison Automotive Group. We are actually in discussions about increasing our stake. We were considering going up to 51%, which would make us the majority shareholder." Mr. Patterson looked like he might actually faint now. "Were?" he asked weakly. "Were," James confirmed. "Because I am now questioning whether Morrison Automotive Group is the kind of company I want to be more deeply involved with. If this is how your staff treats customers, what does that say about your company culture?" "Mr. Park, please," Mr. Patterson said desperately. "This is not representative of our company. This is an isolated incident. I promise you we will address this immediately." James looked at Minji. "What do you think, my love? Is this an isolated incident? Or is this the kind of treatment that happens often to people who do not look wealthy?" Minji thought about it carefully. She was not a vengeful person. She did not want people to lose their jobs, but she also thought about all the other people who might come to this showroom. People who did not have a powerful husband to defend them. People who would just accept the humiliation and leave. "I think," Minji said slowly, "that if they treat me this way, they probably treat other people this way too." James nodded. He turned back to Mr. Patterson. "My wife is right. This is not about us. This is about every customer who has walked into this showroom and been judged unfairly. This is about your company values." Mr. Patterson was sweating now too. "Please, Mr. Park, tell me what I can do to make this right." "I will do anything." "Anything?" James asked. "Anything," Mr. Patterson confirmed desperately. James was quiet for a moment, thinking. The entire showroom waited in silence. Even Jessica had stopped crying, though tears still ran down her face. Finally, James spoke. "I want you to know something, Mr. Patterson. My wife is one of the kindest people I have ever known. She spent 15 years as a social worker, helping homeless families. She worked long hours for little pay because she wanted to help people. Even now, she volunteers at shelters every weekend. She helps people who have nothing." He paused, letting those words sink in. "She chose to wear simple clothes today, not because she cannot afford better. She could buy every car in this showroom and not notice the money missing from our accounts. She wears simple clothes because she is humble, because she does not need expensive things to feel valuable, because she knows that a person's worth has nothing to do with their clothing or their car." Minji felt tears rolling down her cheeks again. James always knew exactly what to say. But your staff, James continued, they did not see any of that. They saw jeans and an old purse and they made a decision. They decided she did not matter. Mr. Patterson nodded miserably. You are absolutely right, Mr. Park. There is no excuse. James looked at Jessica and Brandon. They were both standing together, holding on to each other like they might collapse. Both of them were crying now. How old are you two? James asked them directly. Jessica managed to speak through her tears. 24, sir. 23, Brandon whispered. James nodded slowly. You are both very young. Young enough that maybe you can still learn from this. Maybe you can become better people. Hope flickered in their eyes. Or maybe, James continued, you will just learn to hide your prejudice better, to judge people silently instead of openly. I do not know which it will be. The hope died. James turned to Dong-hyun. Call the Morrison Automotive Group board. Request an emergency meeting for Monday morning. Tell them I will be presenting concerns about customer service standards and company culture. Yes, sir, Dong-hyun said, already pulling out his phone. James looked at Mr. Patterson. You have until Monday to prepare a full report on this incident. I want to know what happened, why it happened, and what you plan to do to make sure it never happens again. And I do not want empty promises. I want concrete action plans. Yes, Mr. Park, Mr. Patterson said quickly. I will have everything ready. James finally looked at Richard. The senior sales manager, who had been so confident earlier, was now a broken man. He could not even look up. Richard, James said quietly, you are old enough to know better. You have no excuse, Richard said nothing. There was nothing to say. James took Minji's hand. Come on, my love. Let us leave this place. There are better dealerships, better people. Minji nodded. She was ready to go. But as they turned toward the door, Mr. Patterson called out desperately, Mr. Park, please, let me offer you something. Any car in this showroom, any car at all at cost. As an apology, James stopped and turned back. He looked at Mr. Patterson with something like pity. Mr. Patterson, he said gently, you still do not understand. This is not about getting a deal. This is not about money. This is about my wife being treated like a human being. And that should never need to be bought or negotiated. It should be freely given to everyone who walks through your door, he looked around at all the people in the showroom one last time. I hope you all learned something from this, he said. James and Minji walked toward the glass doors of the showroom. Their footsteps echoed in the heavy silence. Everyone watched them go. No one spoke. No one moved. But before they reached the exit, James stopped. He turned back one more time. Minji looked up at him, wondering what he was thinking. Actually, James said, his voice carrying across the showroom, there is something else I want to say. Mr. Patterson straightened up immediately. Yes, Mr. Park? James walked back toward the center of the showroom. Minji stayed by his side, her hand in his. He looked at all the people gathered there, the salespeople, the customers, everyone who had witnessed what happened. I want to tell you all about my wife, James said. His voice was softer now, but somehow even more powerful. When I met Minji in college, I had nothing. My family was poor. I was working 3 jobs just to pay for school. I wore the same clothes every week because I could not afford more. Minji squeezed his hand. She remembered those days. They had been hard, but also beautiful. Minji was beautiful and smart and could have dated anyone, James continued. But she chose me. She saw something in me that no one else saw. She did not care about my old shoes or my cheap clothes. She cared about who I was as a person. Some of the customers were nodding now, moved by his words. We got married right after college, James said. We lived in a tiny apartment. Some months we had to choose between buying food or paying the electricity bill, but we were happy. Minji worked as a social worker. She barely made any money, but she loved her job. She helped people every single day. He looked down at Minji with such love that it made her heart ache. When my company started to become successful, the first thing I wanted to do was buy her everything. A big house, expensive cars, designer clothes. But do you know what she said? James paused, looking around the room. She said no. She said she did not need those things. She said she was happy with what we had. She said there were people who needed money more than we did, and we should help them instead. Jessica was crying harder now. Brandon had his head down, unable to look at anyone. That is who my wife is, James said. She is someone who values people over things. Someone who judges character instead of appearance. Someone who treats the homeless person on the street with the same respect she would treat a king. He turned to look directly at Richard, Jessica, and Brandon. And today, you three judged her. You decided she was worth less because of her clothes. You decided she did not deserve your time or your respect. You decided to mock her and humiliate her. Richard opened his mouth to speak, but James held up his hand. I am not finished, James said firmly. You need to understand something. My wife did not come here to prove anything to you. She did not come here to show off wealth or status.
She came here because she loves me.
Because she wanted to surprise me with a gift that would make me happy. She came here with a pure heart and good intentions. His voice grew harder now. And you crushed that. You made her feel small. You made her feel like she did not belong. Do you understand what you did? Jessica nodded, sobbing. Yes, sir. I am so sorry. Sorry is not enough, James said. Sorry is just a word. What matters is whether you actually learn from this. Whether you change, he turned to Mr. Patterson. I want to make something very clear. I'm not asking for these people to be fired. I am not going to use my position to destroy their careers. Relief flooded the faces of Jessica, Brandon, and Richard. But James continued, and the relief disappeared. There must be consequences. Real consequences, not just a slap on the wrist. Mr. Patterson nodded quickly. Absolutely, Mr. Park, what would you suggest? James thought for a moment. First, I want a mandatory training program. Not just for these three, but for every single employee in every Morrison Automotive Group dealership. Training on customer service, on respect, on treating people with dignity regardless of how they look. Done, Mr. Patterson said immediately. I will personally oversee it. Second, James continued, I want a written policy. A clear, unambiguous policy that says discrimination based on appearance is unacceptable and will result in immediate termination. And I want that policy enforced. Actually enforced, not just written down and forgotten. Yes, sir. I will draft it myself and present it to the board. Third, James said, looking at Richard, I want changes in leadership. Richard demonstrated terrible judgment today. Not just in how he treated my wife, but in how he failed to correct his staff. That is not the kind of person who should be in a senior position. Richard's face fell. He looked like he aged 10 years in that moment. Mr. Patterson nodded reluctantly. I understand, Mr. Park. I will handle it appropriately. James turned to Jessica and Brandon. They both looked terrified. As for you two, James said, you are young. You made a terrible mistake. But I believe people can change. I believe people can learn. Jessica and Brandon looked at each other, then back at James. I am going to leave your fate up to Mr. Patterson and the company policies, James said. But I want you to know something. If you do keep your jobs, you have been given a gift. A second chance. Do not waste it. We won't, sir, Brandon said quickly. I promise. I promise too, Jessica added, her voice breaking. I will never treat anyone that way again. James studied them for a moment. I hope that is true. I really do. Dong-hyun approached James again with his tablet. Sir, the board members are confirming for Monday morning. They all agreed to attend. Good, James said. He turned back to Mr. Patterson. On Monday, I will present my concerns to the board. What happens to this dealership will depend on what they decide. But I want you to understand something, Mr. Patterson. Yes, sir. This is not about punishment, James said. This is about making sure that what happened to my wife never happens to anyone else. This is about creating a culture where every customer is valued, where people are judged by their character, not by their clothes. Mr. Patterson nodded vigorously. I understand completely, Mr. Park, and I want you to know I am deeply ashamed of what happened here today. This is not the company I thought we were, but I will make it right. I promise you. James looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. He must have found it because he nodded slowly. I will hold you to that promise. One of the customers who had been watching stepped forward. It was the middle-aged woman who had spoken up earlier. She looked at Minji with kind eyes. Mrs. Park, she said gently, I am so sorry for what happened to you today. You handled yourself with such grace and dignity. I hope you know that not all people are like these three. Minji smiled at her. Thank you. That is very kind of you to say. The woman's husband nodded in agreement. My wife is right. You have our respect and our admiration. Other customers murmured in agreement. One man said loudly, Shame on this dealership. I will take my business elsewhere. Another woman said, me too. I cannot support a company that treats people this way. Mr. Patterson looked panicked. He was not just losing a major investor's goodwill. He was losing customers right in front of his eyes. Please, Mr. Patterson said to the customers, give us a chance to make this right. We will do better. I promise. Some customers looked skeptical. Others looked like they might be willing to give the dealership another chance if they saw real changes. James looked at his watch. Minji and I should go. We have taken enough time here. He turned to Sangmin and Donghyun. Make sure everything is documented. I want a full record of what happened here today. Statements from witnesses, everything. Already done, sir, Sangmin said. I have been recording since we arrived. With the permission of the witnesses, of course. James nodded approvingly. He always thought ahead. He always prepared for every possibility. He took Minji's hand again and they walked toward the door. This time no one stopped them. The doors slid open automatically and they stepped out into the late afternoon sunshine. The 3 luxury cars sat waiting for them. The Rolls-Royce gleamed in the golden light. James led Minji to the passenger side and opened the door for her, just like he always did. Before Minji got in, she turned back to look at the showroom. Through the glass windows, she could see everyone still standing there. Some were talking urgently. Some were crying. Some just looked shocked. She felt a strange mixture of emotions. Anger at how she had been treated. Sadness that people could be so cruel. But also hope. Hope that maybe something good would come from this. That maybe other people would not have to go through what she went through. Are you okay? James asked softly. Minji turned to him and smiled. A real genuine smile. Yes, I am okay. Thank you for standing up for me. Always, James said. He kissed her forehead gently. Always. They got into the car. The leather seats were soft and comfortable. The car smelled faintly of James's cologne. He started the engine and that beautiful, powerful rumble filled the air again. As they pulled away from the dealership, Minji looked back one more time. She saw Mr. Patterson standing at the window watching them leave. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a terrible dream and realized it was real. What do you think will happen to them? Minji asked quietly. James was silent for a moment, focused on driving. Then he said, that depends on them. If they truly learn from this, if they truly change, then maybe something good will come from today. But if they just learn to hide their prejudice better, then nothing will change. I hope they learn, Minji said. So do I. James agreed. They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The city streets passed by outside. People walked on sidewalks, living their normal lives, not knowing that something important had just happened a few blocks away. I am sorry your day was ruined, James said finally. You just wanted to surprise me with a gift. Minji reached over and took his hand. The day was not ruined. You came. That is all that matters. James smiled and squeezed her hand. Besides, Minji added with a small laugh, now I have a better idea. I'm not buying you a car from that place. We will find somewhere else. Somewhere better. Somewhere where they treat you with the respect you deserve, James said. Somewhere where they treat everyone with respect, Minji corrected gently. James looked at her with such admiration. That is why I love you. Even after everything that happened, you are still thinking about other people. Minji shrugged. It is just who I am. I know, James said. And I would not change a single thing about you. They drove home together, hand in hand, leaving Hamilton Luxury Motors behind them. But the story was not over, not yet. What happened next would determine whether this day meant anything, or whether it was just another incident that would be forgotten. Monday morning would come soon. And then everyone would see what real consequences looked like. Monday morning came quickly. The Morrison Automotive Group headquarters was a tall glass building in the business district. At 8 in the morning, the boardroom on the 20th floor was already full. 12 board members sat around a long mahogany table. They were all powerful people. Executives and investors who controlled millions of dollars. And at the head of the table sat James Park. His expression was serious and professional. David Patterson, the dealership manager, sat to James's right. He had not slept well all weekend. He had spent 2 full days preparing his report and his action plan. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. James opened the meeting. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming on short notice. I am sure you are all wondering why I called this emergency meeting. The board members nodded. They had heard rumors, but nothing concrete. On Friday afternoon, James began, my wife visited the Hamilton Luxury Motors showroom. She went there with pure intentions. She wanted to surprise me with a gift for our anniversary. He paused, letting that sink in. Instead, she was humiliated, mocked, and treated with contempt by the staff. She was judged solely on her appearance and was told she did not belong there. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked genuinely shocked. Others looked worried about what this meant for the company. James spent the next 20 minutes telling them exactly what happened. He did not exaggerate. He did not need to. The facts were bad enough on their own. He played the recording that Sang-min had made. Everyone listened in silence to the voices of Jessica, Brandon, and Richard treating Minji with such disrespect. When the recording ended, the boardroom was completely silent. This is unacceptable, said Mrs. Chen, an older board member who had been with the company for 30 years. Absolutely unacceptable. I agree, said Mr. Thompson, another senior member. This is not what our company stands for. Or at least it should not be. James nodded. That is exactly the point. This incident raises serious questions about company culture. Is this an isolated incident? Or is this how customers are regularly treated when they do not look wealthy? Mr. Patterson cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Park, board members, I have prepared a full report. He passed out folders to everyone at the table. Inside were detailed accounts of what happened, statements from witnesses, and most importantly, his action plan for making sure it never happened again. I take full responsibility for what happened at my dealership, Mr. Patterson said. His voice was steady, but you could hear the emotion underneath. I should have created a better culture. I should have trained my staff better. I failed. What are you proposing to fix this? Asked Mrs. Martinez, a board member who owned several other dealerships. Mr. Patterson took a deep breath. First, immediate changes in leadership. Richard Chen has been demoted from senior sales manager to regular sales associate. He will also be required to complete extensive customer service training before he can work with customers again. The board members nodded in approval. Second, Jessica Williams and Brandon Cooper have been suspended without pay for 2 weeks. When they return, they will be on probation for 6 months. One more incident of any kind and they will be terminated immediately. They are also required to complete mandatory training. What about compensation for Mrs. Park? Asked Mr. Lee, a newer board member. James spoke up. My wife does not want money. She wants change. Real change. Mr. Patterson nodded and continued. Third, I am proposing a company-wide training program. Every employee at every dealership will be required to complete modules on customer service, respect, and anti-discrimination practices. This training will be mandatory and will be repeated annually. Who will develop this training? Asked Mrs. Chen. I am proposing we hire an outside consulting firm that specializes in customer service excellence and workplace culture, Mr. Patterson said. They will work with us to create a comprehensive program. James leaned forward. I want to add something to that proposal. Everyone turned to look at him. I want Minji's story to be part of the training, James said. Obviously anonymously, without using our names. But I want every employee to hear what happened and understand how their actions affect real people. Mr. Patterson nodded quickly. That is an excellent idea, Mr. Park. We will make that part of the case studies. What about the policy changes you mentioned? Asked Mr. Thompson. Mr. Patterson flipped to another page in the report. I have drafted a new policy. Zero tolerance for discrimination based on appearance, race, gender, age, or any other factor. First offense results in immediate suspension and retraining. Second offense results in termination. That seems fair, said Mrs. Martinez. But how do we enforce it? How do we know if it is actually happening? Mystery shoppers, suggested Mrs. Chen. We hire people to visit our dealerships and evaluate how they are treated. People of different backgrounds, different appearances, and we do it regularly. The board members murmured in agreement. It was a good idea, James nodded approvingly. That would be a good start. But I also suggest you create a direct reporting line, a way for customers to report problems without going through dealership management. Sometimes managers are part of the problem. We could set up a hotline, Mr. Lee suggested, and an email address. Reports go directly to corporate. Excellent idea, said Mr. Patterson, making notes rapidly. The meeting continued for another hour. They discussed budgets for the training program. They talked about timelines for implementation. They debated how to measure success and hold people accountable. Finally, Mrs. Chen looked at James. Mr. Park, you mentioned on Friday that you were reconsidering your investment in our company. What is your decision now? James was quiet for a moment. Everyone waited. I am impressed with the response today, James said finally. Mr. Patterson has taken responsibility. You are all taking this seriously. You are proposing real solutions, not just empty words. He paused. So I will not reduce my investment. In fact, I am willing to move forward with increasing it to the 51% we discussed. But I have conditions. Name them, said Mr. Thompson. First, all of these changes must be implemented within 90 days. No delays, no excuses. Done, said Mrs. Chen. Second, I want quarterly reports on the mystery shopper results. I want to see real data on how customers are being treated. You will have them, promised Mr. Patterson. Third, I want to be personally involved in reviewing the training program before it is rolled out. I want to make sure it actually addresses the real issues. Of course, said Mrs. Martinez. James nodded. Then we have an agreement. The board members looked relieved. They had been worried about losing their biggest investor. But more than that, they seemed genuinely committed to making changes. After the meeting ended, Mr. Patterson approached James privately. Mr. Park, I want to thank you, he said quietly. James looked surprised. Thank me? For what? For not destroying us? For giving us a chance to do better? Mr. Patterson's eyes were sincere. You could have pulled your investment. You could have gone to the media and destroyed our reputation. But you did not. You gave us an opportunity to learn and improve. James considered this. I did not do it for you. I did it because Minji asked me to. She does not want revenge. She wants change. She wants other people to be treated better. Mr. Patterson nodded. Your wife is a remarkable woman. Yes, James agreed simply. She is. 3 months passed. True to their word, Morrison Automotive Group implemented every change they had promised. The training program was rolled out across all dealerships. The new policies were put in place and strictly enforced. Mystery shoppers visited regularly and submitted detailed reports. Richard Chen struggled with his demotion at first. But slowly, he began to understand what he had done wrong. He completed his training with genuine effort. He started treating every customer with respect, regardless of how they looked. He would never get his senior position back at that dealership, but eventually, he transferred to a smaller branch and started rebuilding his reputation. Jessica Williams and Brandon Cooper returned from their suspension, chastened and humbled. Jessica later said that being suspended was the best thing that ever happened to her. It forced her to really think about the kind of person she wanted to be. She threw herself into the training program and became one of the dealership's best salespeople, known for treating everyone with warmth and respect. Brandon also changed. He volunteered to be part of the team that helped develop the training program. He wanted to make sure that future employees learned from his mistakes. The mystery shopper results were encouraging. In the first month, there were several incidents of poor customer service. But by the third month, scores had improved dramatically. Customers were being treated well regardless of how they looked. David Patterson sent James monthly reports on the progress. He was proving to be a man of his word. As for Minji and James, they eventually did buy a car for their anniversary. But they bought it from a small family-owned dealership across town. The owner was an older man named Mr. Kim who had emigrated from Korea 40 years ago. He treated Minji with respect from the moment she walked in. even though she was wearing her simple jeans and sweater again. The car was a beautiful 1968 Ferrari, restored to perfection. It was the exact model that James had admired when he was young. When Minji surprised him with it on their anniversary, James cried. He said it was the best gift anyone had ever given him, not because of the car itself, but because of what it represented. Minji's love for him, her willingness to remember something he had mentioned once decades ago. They donated the old Hyundai to a single mother who needed reliable transportation to get to work. The woman cried when they gave her the keys. She said they had changed her life. 6 months after the incident at Hamilton Luxury Motors, James received an unexpected visitor at his office. "It was Jessica Williams, Mr. Park," she said nervously when his assistant showed her in.
Thank you for seeing me.
"I know you are very busy. Please sit down," James said kindly, gesturing to a chair. Jessica sat, wringing her hands nervously. "I wanted to come here in person to apologize to you and Mrs. Park. What I did that day was inexcusable. I have thought about it every single day since then." "I appreciate you coming," James said. "I want you to know that I have changed," Jessica continued. "Really changed, not just pretending. I completed all the training. But more than that, I have been volunteering at a homeless shelter on weekends." James raised his eyebrows in surprise. "I wanted to meet the kind of people that Mrs. Park works with," Jessica explained. "I wanted to understand what she sees in them. And you know what I discovered?" "What?" "They are just people," Jessica said, tears forming in her eyes. "People who have had bad luck or made mistakes or faced circumstances they could not control. They are not less than me. They are not worthless. They are human beings who deserve respect and dignity." James felt his own eyes getting wet. That is exactly what Minji would say. "I wish I could tell her," Jessica said. "I wish I could apologize to her personally. But I understand if she does not want to see me." James thought about this. Then he picked up his phone and called Minji. "Hello, my love." Minji's warm voice came through the speaker. "Minji, I have someone here in my office who would like to speak with you. Is that okay?" There was a pause. "Who is it?" "Jessica Williams, from the dealership." Another pause, longer this time. "Then put her on." James handed the phone to Jessica, who took it with shaking hands. "Mrs. Park?" Jessica said quietly, "Yes, Jessica, I am here. Mrs. Park, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for how I treated you. There is no excuse for what I did. I was wrong. I was cruel, and I have regretted it every single day." Minji's voice came through clearly. "Jessica, I forgive you." Jessica started crying. "You do?" "Yes," Minji said gently. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that you learn from them. It sounds like you have." "I have," Jessica said through her tears. "I promise I have. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure I never treat anyone that way again." "That is all anyone can ask," Minji said. "Thank you for calling, and thank you for changing." After Jessica left, James sat at his desk for a long time thinking. He thought about how one incident had sparked so much change, how Minji's grace and dignity had taught so many people such an important lesson. That evening, he came home to find Minji in the kitchen, cooking dinner. She was humming softly to herself, wearing an old apron over her simple clothes. She looked beautiful. James walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Jessica came to see me today," he said. "I know," Minji said, leaning back against him. "She called me. She has really changed." "Yes," Minji agreed. "People can change when they are given the chance and when they truly want to." James kissed the top of her head. "You are amazing, you know that?" Minji laughed. "I am just me." "Exactly," James said. "And that is what makes you amazing." They stood there together in their kitchen in their comfortable home, happy and content. The Ferrari sat in the garage, beautiful and expensive. But it was just a car. What really mattered was standing right here, The story of what happened at Hamilton Luxury Motors spread quietly through the business community. Other companies heard about it and started examining their own practices. Some made changes before they had their own incidents. Others learned the hard way, but always when people told the story, they focused on the same thing. Not on James's wealth or power, not on the expensive cars or the boardroom meetings. They focused on Minji, on her grace under pressure, on her dignity in the face of cruelty, on her willingness to forgive. And the lesson was simple but profound. Treat every person with respect. Judge people by their character, not their appearance, because you never know who someone is, where they have been, or what they have overcome. And more importantly, because every human being deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of who they are or what they look like. That lesson, learned at a luxury car showroom on a Friday afternoon, would ripple out and touch thousands of lives in ways that no one could have predicted. All because one woman wore simple clothes, and one man loved her enough to stand up for her. And together, they reminded the world of something it should never have forgotten. Every person matters. Every person deserves respect. And sometimes, the most simply dressed person in the room is worth more than all the expensive cars combined.